turn it down.
Tonight in Tel Aviv, images that change everything in an escalation that has already spiraled so fast. Israel's missile defense systems lighting up the sky as they try to intercept incoming Hamas rockets. 130 of them were fired from Gaza in one barrage. Flights at the international airport were urgently suspended and diverted. Hamas said it was a specific target. And on the streets, injured Israelis, which, for Israel, will move this conflict onto a different level. The earlier Israeli assault on Gaza, which prompted the Hamas retaliation, had been relentless. And for those who are not the targets, but who are so often the victims, it is terrifying. With the weight of the Israeli Air Force on top of them, there is nowhere safe to run. Locals filmed the moment a 13-storey building collapsed. It's not clear how many people were in it at the time. It is a residential block. The Israelis had earlier said that they were targeting militants in their homes. The number confirmed to have died through the day and the night before continues to rise. Children too. Here, a mother and her son are buried. They're from a refugee camp. Most in Gaza are refugees. And in one of the hospitals, agony and defiance. This man vows revenge for the death of his comrade, a member of Hamas's Jerusalem brigade. On the Israeli side of the fence, which locks Gaza off, in the city of Ashkelon, the air raid sirens sounded through the day. In the skies, the trails of Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. It shot down most of the Hamas rockets. The Israeli communities here are used to attacks from Gaza, but not this many in just a few hours.
This is the third time it's happened since we've been here. You hear the wail of the sirens, and then moments later, sometimes the thud of the rockets as they come in. From Gaza, there have been scores of rockets over the course of the past few hours, most of them hitting here around this town.
A mile away, the home of an elderly lady and her carer. They both died, unable to get to the shelter in time. The Israeli Defense Forces spokesman was here, keen to show us what Israel faces from Hamas. No one can look at this and see anything other than a tragedy that has happened here. But the images that are coming out of Gaza are truly horrific. It seems that what Israel is doing in Gaza is totally disproportionate to what is happening here.
I would beg to differ. I think that what we are doing are specific strikes against military targets inside Gaza that are part of the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad's military infrastructure.
We watched the Iron Dome intercept some of them as they flew north.
Let's go in. Come on, Mohammed.
Hamas claims to be the defender of the Palestinian cause, striking their occupier. Israel will strike back harder still, and the diplomacy to break this cycle isn't there.
Right, so that happened this past week. So I thought we might as well do a bit of a history lesson. This is going to take 2, maybe 3 weeks. Try and do it too. So whoever's next and whoever's after that can run here. So remember that next month, Eric. Need a month off.
We can't, no,
yeah, we'll just keep track of those things. So if you're as old as I am, quite old now, you would remember lots of this sort of conflict happening in Israel, Palestine, Iraq, and every 5 years or something it seems to flare up, and they talk about peace all the time and peace treaties and all that. So we're gonna look right back at the beginning. So we read in Genesis already. So we're going to look at the promises God made to certain people. Then we're going to kind of skip a lot of the Bible history because we already have it in the Bible and we kind of know it. And we're going to jump to the Roman occupation. And then we're going to look at what happened from that point on through to now. Well, through to 1948. Okay, that's a significant event in time. And leading up to that, sort of the late 1800s and what was going on with the Jews. And then jump into this. And see this, I guess the sadness we see there. Israel's getting bombarded by rockets from Hamas, and innocent people are getting injured and killed. And in Israel, in their defence, firing or dropping bombs and rockets back at military targets, they say, which is their right. But civilians get caught up in the mess as well. So it's really sad on both sides of the situation. And we'll look at what the world's trying to do to, or have been trying to do over so many years to make that the two-state scenario work. And that's where 1948 is important, or around that time. And the wars that followed that as well. So a bit of a history lesson mostly today is looking at verses because we need to just establish God's promises to these people, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. So God made covenants with them. And so Genesis 12, start there. We'll rip through, make the foundation for this, and then next week we'll probably look at more of history stuff. So let's establish what happened here. Genesis 12, 1-3 says, Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So, God's made a promise here to Abram, if he departs and follows God, then God will make a great nation of him, bless him, make your name great. You shall be a blessing. He'll bless them that blesses him, and curse them that curse you, and he'll bless all the families of the earth through Abram. So this was the original conditional covenant that God made. And so if Abraham would obey God, then God would provide him these 7 blessings. And the last one being really important is a prophecy of Jesus Christ, that all nations would, or all the families of the earth would be blessed through him. So eventually all people of God's creation will be blessed because of Christ's ultimate sacrifice on the cross. So verse 5, going into there. And Abraham took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto a place of Sichem, unto the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. So promised to that his descendants would be given the land of Canaan, and this was the area around Shechem, right? I'll just go to chapter 13, And we'll look in verse 14, I think it is. Yep. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. So look all around about you. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. So all the land of Canaan, as far as his eye could see, was to, God would give it to Abraham forever. So the promise is there. Let's jump down to verse 16. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then thy seed also be numbered. So once again, a promise that God would make Abraham's seed a great multitude of people. Be so many that it would be what would seem impossible to count. Chapter 15. Let's go over there. In verse 5. And he brought him forth abroad and said, look now toward heaven and tell the stars if they be able to number them. If thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall thy seed be. So got told to look at the stars, and that would be like your seed, so impossible to number. And imagine Abraham going out. There's no cities, there's no lights and stuff like that, right? And he'd be able to look in the sky and just see an amazing display of stars, planets. It'd be quite awesome. So if you've ever had the chance to go to maybe Tekapo and see the night sky down there, or just out into the mountain areas, and just stare at the sky. It's amazing. It blows your mind to see it. So Abraham's looking up and trying to count the stars, and just probably blew his mind that this promise of God that his seed would be so numerous, right? Chapter 15, verse 18. And the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So the seed of Abram would be given the land from Egypt to Euphrates, and this was an unconditional covenant that God made at the time where he promised this to Abram. There doesn't appear to have been fully fulfilled yet, because Solomon and Abram's descendants have never totally possessed this area, and what they have had, they've soon lost it. So that's possibly still to be fulfilled. All right, so that's that one there. So the seed of Abram would have the land from Egypt to Euphrates. Over into chapter 17. Verses 1 and 2. And when Abram was 90 years old and 99, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. So God told him to walk before me uprightly, and I will make a covenant to bless your seed exceedingly. So at 99 years old, God just reaffirms this with Abraham. Abraham was told to obey and God would bless. So there's a condition here. Obey and I will bless you. Verses 4. Let's go to 4 to 6. As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be called Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. So, you'll be the father of many nations, and the nations and kings shall come from you. So, I mean, these are pretty amazing promises to a farmer, right? Pretty much. Told to get out of his land and go here, and these are pretty, pretty amazing promises. So God expands then the details of the original covenant from 24 years ago, that Abraham's seed would be in many nations with a line of kings, and there's a dual promise of birthright and in here as well. So, all right, let's go over to Genesis 17 and verse 7. We're up there, carry on. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in the generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. So God would establish his covenant that he had made with Abraham with his descendants. So saying here, the covenant I've made with you, I'm going to make with your descendants. And the key, though, is it's conditional. It's a conditional covenant that God established with Abraham. So he would be their God, and in return they would get physical blessings. But remember, he told Abraham that he had to obey. Right? So if Abraham obeyed God, then these blessings will follow. So he's telling Abraham here that God will establish his covenant they had with Abraham. Now he will establish it with his descendants also. Let's look at verse 8. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, and all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant there, for thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. So God would give the land of Canaan to Abraham's descendants as an everlasting possession. And the land has not been fully obtained as an everlasting possession. And we read through the Bible, we see Abraham's descendants often broke the terms of the covenant with God. So they failed to obey and broke covenant terms. But they haven't yet held the land as an everlasting possession. All right, next one. 17 and verse 10. This is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man, child, in your generations. He that is born in the house, or brought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with the money, must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. Just see what we go to here. And the uncircumcised man child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarah thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. So, God establishes circumcision as a sign of this covenant. And all the guys, when they hear that, do that. Right? But this was an important covenant. It was a conditional covenant that God made with Abraham for his descendants. And after Christ, it was modified, so it didn't. Yeah, it was modified. We'll look at that later. Now to become, I guess, an heir of Abraham, it's not necessarily the physical act of circumcision, but the Bible talks about it being a spiritual change. Circumcision of the heart is what's talked about. All right. Yeah. So makes me cringe. 15 and 16. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarah thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. So God would bless Abraham's wife, Sarah, that she would be the mother of nations, and kings would come from her. And that she's 90 years old and hasn't yet produced a child, and we all know the story, how that goes. So God made this covenant promise with Sarah, or with Abraham, that his wife would produce him a son. Her name was changed to reflect the honour of this, and right, let's go to verse 19. Chapter 17, verse 19. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And verse 21, we'll just skip 20 for now. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, and with Sarah shall bear unto thee at this time, at the set time in the next year. So God promised a son through through Sarah, and he would establish his everlasting covenant with Isaac and his seed. So God promised that 1 year later from this promise that Isaac would be born. Now, verse 20, let's just jump back to there. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceeding. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. So God's promise to Abraham was that his seed would become great and a numerous amount of people, right? So, and then this is where we have a split off. Maybe next week we'll chuck up a family tree. So Abraham's seed now goes through Isaac and Ishmael, and both those men, or his sons, are blessed by God according to the promise that he gave Abraham, and they are a numerous amount of people. Was the promise there. So we'll come back to Ishmael later on. It won't be today, but it'll be next week. Right. Genesis 22. And verse 17. That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. So God again promises that he will bless Abraham's seed as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashore. Just confirming that there's going to be a lot of descendants from you. And there's a specific promise of power being given, of that your seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. So it's an interesting promise there. All right. Verse 18. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So all the nations of the earth would be blessed through Abraham's seed. That's just confirmed again. Because thou hast obeyed my voice. Abraham's obedience. Because of that, all nations of the earth would be blessed. It's both a physical and a spiritual promise. Because of the future indication of something happening. We didn't know exactly, he didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but Christ was going to come and redeem us. All right. And then there's some, okay, we'll go over to Genesis 26. So that we dealt with Abraham and the promises made to him. Now let's have a look at Isaac. Starting verse 1. There was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell of thee. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So, three-part promise that his seed would be innumerable, his seed would possess this land that he was in, and in his seed will all the nations of the earth be blessed. So now God's establishing the covenant directly with Isaac. So it was before with Abraham, and he promised Abraham that his son would receive the covenant, or the blessings as well. But now he's talking directly to Isaac. God establishes the covenant with Isaac because his father Abraham had obeyed and followed God. Again, it's a dual blessing, that a physical blessing and a spiritual blessing as well. Through him would come the lineage that produce, or that Jesus Christ would come from. Okay. And let's go to 26 verse 24. And the Lord appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. So God tells Isaac that I will bless you and multiply your seed for Abraham's sake. So a promise that Isaac's seed would be blessed because of Abraham. So we've seen this all follow through. Genesis 27 and verse 28. Actually, we'll go 26. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's son bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. I think I read too far there, but so promises to Jacob. So we have Isaac now blessing Jacob, and there's some deceit behind this. We all know the story of Esau and Jacob, right? And Esau was the oldest, and Jacob is Rebecca, yeah. Rebecca's plotted to have Jacob steal Esau's birthright. So there's some deceit here. It's sealed with a kiss, which is interesting because Christ's betrayal was also sealed with a kiss. So there's links there if you want to look into that. But so Isaac's blessing Jacob, and that the blessing of his descendants would obtain these locations of the earth, and there would be greatness among the nations as well. Okay. Once a promise is made, it couldn't be reversed. So even when found out it was, I guess technically it was an error, the promise was made and it's not reversed. Okay, Genesis 28. Let's start in verse 13. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth. And thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. Okay, so we have. So a dual promise of blessings through national greatness and through Messiah, or the Messiah. So it's an unconditional dual promise made to Abraham and now given to Jacob by God himself. So that's God speaking to Jacob. And the promise of physical greatness, and a promise that was yet to be fulfilled at that time, and the blessing that the world through that the world would receive Jesus Christ. Okay? So that was the dual promise of that. Yeah, directly from God to Jacob. Alright. And we're just finishing up. So Genesis 32. And 28. Let's just start at 24. So Genesis 32 verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he had prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince thou hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, not sure. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So Jacob is given a new name here after wrestling with, says a man, but then at the end he says he'd seen God face to face and survived. But Jacob's given the name Israel, and it means, here you go, he struggles with God. And let's go to the 35:10, just quickly look at that one. Let's start in verse 9. And God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padanaram, and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. We might as well carry on. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply a nation, and the company of nations shall be of thee. The kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I give Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. So God's confirmed the name change from Jacob to Israel, and the name, spelling mistake, sorry. The name characterizes the nation of Israel, and that they struggle with God. They struggle with men as well, and struggle with themselves, but the struggles with God is really an interesting name to give them as a nation. And that's it for today, right? So that's just building the background to God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, later called Israel. And next week we'll look at the 12 tribes, just there, and then we're going to jump all the way forward to Roman occupation times of the area, and then just carry on through history as we know it. And and then look at the future of Israel as well, is the plan. So that might be the third week. So hope that's given you some background to that. It's just interesting to see what's happened in the news. Depending on what news outlet you read, actually, doesn't really. They're all kind of biased against Israel. Most people agree that Israel should be able to defend itself, but I guess the argument comes about how much should you defend yourself when you're bigger in power. But we'll look at that later as well. And that is it. So let's close.